Hello, I'm Regid Ahmed with BBC World News. Our top story, a bump in the road for Uber. It loses a landmark case over its drivers' rights. A UK tribunal says they're entitled to minimum wage rates and holiday pay. So what does it mean for other workers? As Syrian rebels fight back against the government's siege of eastern Aleppo, the Russian military asks President Putin if it can resume airstrikes. The one-child policy may be over, but we reveal how China keeps a tight grip on family life. And this is Paris, where officials say the number of migrants sleeping rough has risen by at least a third since the start of the week. It follows the closure of the camp in Calais. We'll get the latest. Hello and welcome. In what could turn out to be a major blow to the taxi app Uber, a tribunal here in the UK has ruled in favour of Uber drivers, saying they should be treated as normal workers and given holiday pay and the minimum wage. Uber had argued that it's just a technology company, not a taxi provider, and that their drivers work for themselves as self-employed people. Uber operates in more than 70 countries worldwide. Justin Bowden is from the trade union which represented the Uber drivers at the centre of this case. Well, a short time ago I spoke to the BBC's business presenter Tanya Beckett about the implications of the ruling both in the UK and the 76 other countries where Uber says it operates.
It has been widely understood that the growing gig economy in which people are able to, I would put it, commoditise their work, whereby they can offer a certain period of time of their work, and it can be similar enough to what people do such that they could have ratings and so on. Many jobs don't work like that, but there are certain jobs that do, and driving cars, taxi driving is one of them. So it feels, particularly in the UK, that unions have been saying for some time, look, the law really hasn't kept up with how the economy is developing. There is thought that there are about 40,000 Uber drivers in the UK. So the implication could be that now other workers seeing this could talk about going to court concerning the sites that they interact with, because there are many of them, TaskRabbit and so on, Elance and so on, and ask whether they are getting the minimum wage, which may not be a problem in their particular case, but also this question of holiday pay, which in many ways is a more interesting one.
Now, Uber operates in many places around the world. Yeah. This has been a contentious issue there too. What does that mean internationally?
Well, it might, obviously, law is very specific to the country in which it's in, quite obviously, but it does tend to set a precedent. If you see workers saying, well, look, they're not happy with that there, so let's try this here, they could bring that to court. It was the union in the UK, of course, that brought it. It wasn't individual workers, and that, of course, gives it extra weight. But it does, in some ways, not really raise the question of the shape of the gig economy, more the economics behind it. So, for example, Uber now, unquestionably, in some cases, will have to pay its drivers more. The interesting question over the minimum wage, I think, is would you then deduct costs? Because inevitably drivers do have costs. They have fuel costs, amongst other things. So how would you calculate that? And inevitably, if they're paying their drivers more, that makes it more expensive for the customer in the end. So whether Uber swallows that or whether the customer swallows that is the ultimate question.
In terms of what's going to happen in London, do you think customers are going to see an immediate change?
Well, Uber is appealing this, so the immediate answer is probably not, and that, of course, will take time. But I think raising awareness over this issue and making a business model which is sustainable is obviously in Uber's interest. So it may well be that it will try to do something for its drivers to make sure that they feel more comfortable.
The Russian military says it's asked President Putin for permission to renew airstrikes in the east of the Syrian city of Aleppo. It comes after rebel groups launched a major offensive today to try and lift the siege on their side of the city. These are the first pictures we're getting that are said to show an attack in Aleppo, which has been a key battleground in the 5-year conflict. They're from the Ahrar al-Sham Islamist group, one group in the coalition of fighters launching this offensive. Now, the BBC can't independently verify these pictures. Our correspondent in Beirut, James Longman, explained to me earlier why this offensive was launched. And that was the BBC's James Longman in Beirut. Now, we are just hearing from Reuters that the Kremlin says that President Putin believes the resumption in Aleppo airstrikes would be unnecessary. So we will keep across that story for you. The number of migrants sleeping rough on the streets of Paris has risen by at least a third since the start of the week, according to officials. Now, this coincides with when the migrant camp in Calais was evacuated. Hundreds of tents have been pitched by migrants, with numbers growing substantially this week. And it's estimated there are up to 2,500 sleeping rough in the area now. That's up by around 1,000 a few days before. Well, our correspondent Hugh Schofield is in Paris for us. Hugh, first of all, are these migrants from the Calais camps?
Well, there's some doubt about that. It's not clear, is the answer. It seems likely to me that some will be from Calais, but we're getting word from officials that they certainly don't account for all this increase. I mean, people are arriving in Paris from other places, from people who've crossed over from Libya to Italy, made their way up through Italy and coming up north, heading for Calais. There will be, I'm sure, some from Calais. It seems just logical that there'll be some from Calais, and also some from Calais who left before the evacuation, which started on Monday. I mean, don't forget that this was flagged up long in advance. The people living in the so-called jungle knew very well that the clear-out was going to come. So the diehards, those who did not want to go down the path of officialising their refugee application in France, who wanted to keep alive the idea of going to England, might well have, in the days preceding the evacuation, gone to ground and ended up here in Paris, plus some who in the last few days have done the same. That seems to be logical, but what we're hearing from officials is that it's not just them that account for the this big increase apparently in the last few days.
What are authorities doing? Are they going to offer them a chance to apply for asylum?
Well, this is an ongoing, this is a chronic problem in Paris as well. I mean, don't forget that Paris has seen for years now people living rough in their hundreds, if not in their thousands, and periodically they get cleared. The encampments get cleared out, and the people get moved into often into more proper accommodation, and in a way that's what they want now. I'm just reading some of the reports that are coming in the local press here. I mean, a lot of the people who are living rough up there with winter approaching, it's been quite cold at night recently, they're actually quite hopeful of the CRS, the police moving in to clear them out, because if that happens, they will be put out in the outer suburbs of Paris perhaps, or they'll be put in proper buildings and get a decent night's sleep. It's not fun out there at the moment. So this is a chronic problem. The people, the numbers build up and then they're moved on. Who knows precisely where they all end up. The Paris authorities, though, do have formulated one kind of answer to this, which is to set up a permanent base for these migrants living rough, which will be opened in the next few weeks, not far from where all these camps are. But again, that's a camp, that's a centre, in a disused railway building, which will take in maybe 400 people at a time. But the idea is that they'll be moved on pretty swiftly as well. And where to? Well, that's the problem. Then there is this growing need across France, exemplified by what happened in Calais and the way people were moved out of there, for accommodation for the thousands of people who are living rough and need either to be processed so that they apply for refugee status in France, or, in theory, are returned to the countries, Italy, Greece, where they crossed into Europe from in the first place. Though, of course, I think that is most unlikely to happen.
Hugh Schofield in Paris, thank you very much. Well, 1 year ago, China announced the end of its infamous one-child policy. It was seen as a softening of China's approach to family life. But a BBC investigation has found harsh measures remain. In theory, all couples are now allowed to have 2 children. But what if they want 3 or more? From Beijing, John Sudworth reports. Well, stay with us on BBC World News. Still to come. Time is running out to fix the world's most famous clock. Big Ben undergoes restoration to avoid the death knell of the London landmark. This is BBC World News. I'm Regid Ahmed. The latest headlines. Uber is told that its drivers are not self-employed and are entitled to receive minimum wage rates and holiday pay by an employment tribunal in the UK. As Syrian rebels fight back against government troops to break the siege in eastern Aleppo, President Putin turns down a request from the Russian military to resume airstrikes. After years of negotiations, an international agreement to create the world's largest marine sanctuary has been agreed. It will be located in the Ross Sea in the pristine waters of Antarctica. Our environment correspondent Matt McGrath has this report. Well, let's get back to our main story this hour. As we've just heard, the tribunal ruling here in London affecting about 40,000 drivers for the cab sharing company Uber. Well, with me now is Asif Hanif, one of the drivers who brought the case. Thank you very much for your time. First of all, what's your reaction to this ruling?
I think this is one of the most remarkable ruling by the court and the court of the law, that we're standing for recognition of the rights of the working people, rights of the people, those who are working hard, and they should be rewarded. And it's about the recognition. It's not about only the drivers. It's about every field and every class of the working people, those who are working in this modern age, not to be driven by these kinds of apps where on the other side there is a human being doing the job, and we are making and earning profits to these companies. And those companies who are taking advantage of the system here in Britain, they should also be subjected to the responsibilities. We were the partners, only the responsibility partners. Rest of the thing happens, nothing to do with them. It's their job, it's their app, they are generating the work. I am licensed as a driver, I'm not licensed as an operator, which Uber is licensed as an operator, so they should have to respect it. It's about, you see, when you are making the companies successful, then these companies should also be feeling responsible about those people who are working hard and who are working day and night for them to be successful.
One of the issues has been coming out of this, and we should say Uber is going to appeal the decision, but the question is, how do you want to see Uber implement this? Should they be increasing the fares? Should they be cutting into their profits?
You will be very surprised to know that if you are living in London, these fares were, with the passage of the time, your skills and your standards that you raise, it's also the standard of living should also be raised. It's not them, they are going to put any money and they are going to cut their profit. It's about just putting the right fare, and TfL has got all these things in law. It is just the Uber were driving their own greed to get the whole market by unfair competition, strategies. And I don't think so that it's kind of these companies. If the companies are not looking after their workers, they should better do this.
Mr. Hanif, I'm sorry we have to leave it there, but thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Now, disturbing reports are emerging of mass killings by fighters from so-called Islamic State in the city of Mosul. The UN Human Rights Office says it has evidence 190 former government troops and more than 40 civilians were massacred 2 days ago, while thousands of civilians from outlying districts are being forced into the city to act as human shields as IS braces for an assault by pro-government forces. Richard Galban has this report. He's insulted Pope Francis and told Barack Obama to go to hell. But now the president of the Philippines says he'll stop swearing after what he says was a direct intervention from God. Rodrigo Duterte said it happened while he was flying back from a visit to Japan. He described the moment to reporters. Philippines President there, Rodrigo Duterte. Now, just before we go, scientists in Britain have confirmed that what looked like a brown pebble found in the south of England more than 10 years ago is in fact the first known example of a petrified dinosaur brain. Here it is. The brain was remarkably well preserved because the dinosaur's head became buried in a highly acidic and low oxygen body of water, such as a swamp, when it died. The scientists believe it came from a large plant-eating animal such as an iguanodon. That's it for now. We'll see you soon. Much more on the website.
Hello there.